Okay guys, we are looking at Ming and Qing China. What we are seeing is that the Mongols that we've seen before in China are finally out, and we're going to get a new dynasty coming in. So we remember the Mongol dynasty is named the Yuan dynasty. The Mongols are able to come into China, and they basically took control of China, and all of our Chinese traditions, such as Confucianism, the examination system, the adherence to Chinese ancestor veneration, have been gone. The Mongols came in and they established a whole new realm of stuff. And we're going to see when the Ming dynasty comes in, they're going to bring back old Chinese culture. So they're going to restore Confucianism. They're going to restore the government bureaucracy. They're going to restore Chinese traditional items that we've seen before. One of the biggest things that we've seen consistently across the Chinese Empire is that in every single dynasty, they've been creating a wall. And when we did this on our maps before, we had added portions and portions. But with the invasion of the Mongols, we see that that wall has fallen into disarray. So the Ming dynasty will be the first full dynasty that actually creates the Great Wall. We've seen portions of it before, but they're going to do it in its entirety of what we know it today. And again, it's going to be for protection on the northern borders from nomadic people. Eventually, the Ming dynasty will collapse. We will see there's pirates off the eastern coast that plunder the merchant ships from China. There is going to be a series of famines that lead to political disarray, lead to peasant revolts, and the invasion of a group of people named the Manchu who come from Manchuria. And when they invade, they will eventually topple the Ming dynasty and form the Qing dynasty. And so Qing China is ruled by a group of people from the northern border of Manchuria. And the reason why they were able to take over was because of their skill and prowess in the military. We're going to see that they're going to do a lot of distinctions between them and the Chinese. They don't allow marriage between Chinese and Manchurian people. Chinese could not travel to Manchuria. They could not learn the Manchurian language. And Chinese men had to embrace the hairstyle of the Manchurian people. And so this was just a sign of submission. And so y'all see that haircut on the right-hand side. So again, it seems like the Manchurians are kind of like the Mongols, right? The Mongols had done the same thing. They didn't allow the Chinese to intermarry with the Mongols. They did not allow the Chinese to control their government. They did not allow the Chinese. So we're kind of seeing the same thing with the Manchurians as the Mongols had done before. But one of the things that they do is they allow the Chinese to keep their Confucian values of like what we've seen of filial piety, that rulers should be adherent to the needs of their constituents. And so we're going to see these rulers do promote public welfare. They encourage agriculture. And the Qing rulers will expand to Taiwan, Mongolia, Tibet, Vietnam, Burma, Nepal, and basically create those as vassal states that they have to pay tribute, they have to adhere. One of the other things that we're going to see come back is this thing called the Son of Heaven. We probably remember it as the Mandate of Heaven, and it's going to sound very similar to that. We're going to see the Son of Heaven is this concept that the emperor is seen as a human being that is designated by the heavenly powers to maintain order on earth. What we've seen before with the Mandate of Heaven, that the gods come in and remove someone who is not adhering to the needs of the people. It's kind of like the Son of Heaven. It's a divine intervention, and the emperor is giving adherence from the powers above to govern. And we're going to see that one of the things that will happen is that Beijing will become the new capital, and this is where our emperor will live. He will live in the Forbidden City. And so here is Beijing, the Forbidden City, and we see it's very closed off. We know that he moves the capital here because he wanted to be closer to the northern border to prevent attacks. And this is just going to become the Imperial Palace. Okay, one of the other things that is brought back after the Mongols have been subdued is the idea of the bureaucracy, the government. And we've seen this from Confucian times that people needed to study. They needed to know how to write. They needed to know Confucian ideas by reading the Analects. And so the people who wanted to be part of the government, who ran the day-to-day business of the state, had to take a civil service exam. We're going to see that there's only 200 positions, 20,000 positions, and tons of people who are applying for them. And so people who are applying for the positions would go to these camps, basically. Do y'all see these little side rooms over here? They would live their weekend in these little side rooms. They would bring their stuff to study. They would bring their own food. And then they would go into this big house right here, and they would take their exam. And so this is what's going to lead to a social hierarchy, that our privileged class are people who are the bureaucrats, people who've passed this exam. The gentry are people who have land, who are making money off of it. Next is the working class. The working class include the peasants who adhere to the land, who build stuff, the artisans, the workers. The merchants are seen as beneath them because they profit off other people's labor. Then we have the military, and then the slaves and indentured servants and entertainers, and the lower lives of society. So this is similar to a social hierarchy we've seen before, except the military is on the bottom, which is not something that we've seen. And merchants are on the bottom. It's not something we see. Filial piety comes back. This idea that the son is subservient to the dad. The children respect their fathers. And also, this is something that we expect, that the people respect their emperors. Foot binding is a thing. And again, it's that idea that if a woman is to get married, it is something that's considered beautiful at this time. Also, it signifies class, that if a woman has her foot bound, she's probably of the higher class, that the parents don't need her to work. Women are still caught up in the patriarchy. Women cannot divorce men. But a man could put aside a wife if she bears no children, or she's guilty of adultery, theft, disobedience to her husband. So this is that patriarchy we've seen before. We know that in China that there had not been a devout religion. Buddhism and Taoism really hone in at this time, but this is the era of exploration, and we're going to see the Catholic Church is going to try to come into China and to do missionary work. We're going to see Matteo Ricci wants to convert the Ming Emperor, and he's going to educate himself on Chinese language and Confucianism, and he's going to bring in knowledge of Catholicism to the court and brings in new technology. Even though he does all of this, there will be little success in converting the Chinese people to Christianity. One of the biggest impacts from westward expansion, but I meant exploration, is that the Columbian Exchange is going to bring in new foods, and it's going to improve the diets. We see it brings in potato, it brings in corn, and this is going to lead to dramatic growth. Actually, these items from the Americas will take off in China, which will allow for their population to grow. We're going to see trade. Many people wanted to trade with the Chinese for their silk, their porcelain, and their tea. And this is what's going to lead to Zhenghe and the Ming Dynasty, controlling trade in the Indian Basin. But eventually the Chinese will turn inward and they will not trade anymore. And this is when the Qing Dynasty puts the limits in interactions. And we're going to see they're going to limit where people could come in the port. There's only one port. They're going to limit what merchants could come in. They're actually going to make people trade in their items for silver and gold by the Chinese. And basically at this time of the Qing Dynasty, China turns inward. China starts to isolate its stuff. And the government, in order to do this, the government will take more control. And this will eventually lead us to a policy of where China turns inward. And this will lead to when imperialism occurs, because China has closed itself off, that the Europeans want to come in. Okay, I think we're done with China. And we've kind of seen China in all these other chapters, but we're coming in and encapsulating it here.